to Wiki with John Munitz, and this is the People's Podcast. John, would you like to let the people know who is going to be speaking with us today?
Sure, Jackie. Happy to. So today on the program, we're focused on the subject of, as you are all well aware, this is Business Month. We're trying to support the small businesses out there. And so we thought, who better to talk to than the American Small Business League president, Lloyd Chapman, to talk about what we could be doing to support the small business community, some of the issues that they're facing, and how government can be a more efficient partner to support those who are looking to start businesses, even like our own. So without any further ado, let's bring Lloyd onto the program.
Hello.
Lloyd, welcome to the People's Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So Lloyd, obviously we gave a little bit of a background that you're currently the president of the American Small Business League, but could you explain for the people out there what that does and what led you up to that point of becoming the president there?
Well, let's see. That's a long story. I'll give you the short version. Let's see. I was working in a small computer company in Northern California that was participating in federal programs for small businesses. And I found out we were losing small business set-aside contracts to a company in Amsterdam with 26,000 employees in 28 countries. And I started looking into that. I went to the Small Business Administration database of small businesses, and I found thousands of the biggest companies on earth in the SBA's database of small businesses. I called everybody in Washington, and finally, I got a hold of someone at the Government Accountability Office, and they launched a 6-month investigation, and they found that the federal government was giving small business contracts to over 5,000 large businesses. There was a congressional hearing, and I testified. It was a 5.5-hour hearing. The Associated Press wrote a story about it, ran in newspapers all across the country. And the next thing I knew, I was a small business advocate. And people started calling me, from all around the country. And I actually started suing the federal government in 1989 under the Freedom of Information Act to expose fraud and abuse in federal programs. And at this point in time, my lawyers tell me that I've won more freedom of information legal battles against the federal government than anyone in history. I've won 110. I've got 3 cases in federal court right now. I've seen government attorneys sobbing uncontrollably in federal court 3 times. And the judges don't like it, when they see what the government does. And I think the thing that I'm proudest of is Federal District Court Judge William Alsop, in a case I won about a year ago, described me as being in a David and Goliath battle against big government and big business. I'm going to have that tattooed on my forehead.
Those are 2 entities to have as good common foes. It means you're fighting for the people here and those that need the help. So let me ask you the question. Obviously, you're talking about how we have some Goliaths being classified as small businesses.
Absolutely.
Could you talk about more specifically how we define a small business in America?
Okay. Well, U.S. Census Bureau data says that 99% of all American companies have less than 500 employees. 98% have less than 100. 97% have less than 20. And the average company in America has 10 employees. So I would define a small business as being, I'll say 100 employees or less. And that was the federal standard up until like 1985 when they raised it, through the roof. Today, Fortune 500 firms and their subsidiaries are considered small businesses by the United States government. And you can Google Fortune 500 firms landing federal small business contracts and read those stories. That story's been on every TV channel, national TV news channel. It's been in every newspaper in the country. And there's been, 15, 20 federal investigations. But Public Citizen did a study called Slighted that talked about that. And Mother Jones did an article about it. I think that one was called Corporate Giants Reaping Billions in Federal Small Business Contracts. So, it's gone on for over 20 years. But I'll tell you something that people don't know, you'll never see it on television. The largest economic stimulus program that's ever passed by Congress for the American people is the Small Business Act. And that law mandates that a minimum of 23% of all federal spending go to small businesses. And nobody knows that. You never hear it on television. When they passed the American Reinvestment Recovery Act, small business got $1 billion. When they passed the Troubled Asset Relief Program, I think they got $2 billion. If they gave small businesses the 23% the law mandates, it would be over $350 billion a year. But that's the largest economic stimulus program, and it affects no matter what you do. If you're a policeman in Miami or a plumber in Seattle, a doctor in Texas, that you're affected by that because they're basically pulling money out of the middle class economy the way the government has been conducting themselves for the last 20 years.
So I have to ask Lloyd, when we have this, there's obviously the government side of things, and we could talk all day about some of the problems, and we'll get into some of them later. But, I really want to ask, what are the big issues that small businesses are facing? Like right now, obviously, there's been a bit more of a focus because we just went through kind of an economic calamity, and we still are going through it. But what really is the big issues that you are seeing as the concerns that small business communities are sharing with each other? What are they asking for your advocacy? Is it just government procurement, or are there other things that they're calling out as common issues?
Well, I'll start off by saying something that might sound kind of radical, but the United States government is anti-small business. And I'll challenge anybody out there to find a piece of legislation that was passed in the last 30 years that benefited the 97% of all U.S. firms that have less than 20 employees. You can't find it. By the way, another Census Bureau statistic, those firms with 20 employees or less, they're responsible for over 97% of all net new jobs in America. And and they're completely ignored by Congress and legislation and White House policy. But a major problem that small businesses have is access to capital. I remember going to a bank and asking for a $20,000 loan to start a business, and the woman just started laughing like I told her a joke. She looked it through, her head back and laughed. I could see her, teeth, right? She thought that was funny. And access to capital is a big problem because when you start a small business, it's rare that it's going to start making money immediately, right? Depending on what it is. And you need capital to grow that business, and you need to be able to pay your overhead every month, probably for 2 years, quite frankly, to be on the safe side. And so most small businesses are undercapitalized, and it's very difficult to get loans from banks. After the economic collapse of 2008, the federal government actually made it harder for banks to loan money to small businesses. I think CNN did a story about that after the collapse in 2008, that access to capital for small businesses had actually been cut, even though everyone in Washington said that we needed to pass the Troubled Asset Relief Program so small businesses could have more access to capital. In reality, it reduced access to capital. So access to capital, getting a loan, that's the number one problem. And the Small Business Administration has a program that people can take advantage of, but you have to have a relationship with your bank. The SBA guarantees the loan. The bank has got to give you the loan, and the SBA will kind of guarantee it. But if you don't have a relationship with the bank, you're not going to get those, SBA loans. But that's a big problem. The last time I looked, I've heard this number for the last 20 years. I believe 96% of all small businesses fail within the first 48 months. I believe that statistic holds true today. It sounds kind of crazy, but if you've got $100,000 and you want to start a small business, you've got a better chance of going to Las Vegas and put it on, 27 red, let the wheels spin. At least you've got one chance in 36 of, if that hits, if you put $100,000 on there, right? You're going to be rich. But it's tough to get financing.
Yeah, that's the truth. Oh,
That was like that's another thing that's just so kind of like double speak is we talk about, you even hear like Visa and MasterCards talk about small business, but like when you actually look at what's happening, everything is so stacked against us. As I'm a small business, John's a small business, like
I think it's much worse than people think it is.
Yeah. And they give so much lip service about small business is the engine of, growth. And you
right.
like all the stats that you just cited, I mean, this kind of goes back to like workers' rights and stuff. Like,
Yep.
we are the economy, and they just let us out. I mean, hung us out to dry, like other countries that did the payroll, bailouts that were paying a percentage of businesses' salaries and stuff to keep those businesses open. We got nothing like that. We got $1,400, and you're lucky if you got it.
I remember. Go ahead.
The one point I wanted to make is, this has been something that I've been noticing as a trend, to your point about just generally anti-business environment from the government. It happens even for the parties who want to claim they're the pro-business, cutting taxes, even those things where they say these things are helping. When you even look at things like the Trump tax cut, what did it actually do to small businesses? It actually raised their taxes up and flattened the overall tax rate. The Trump tax cut was a massive tax cut for large businesses, but it was actually a tax raise on a lot of small businesses. And so it's a crazy notion to me why government is so, anti-small business, other than there's not as much people from small business communities funding these campaigns as easily, potentially. That's the only thing that comes through my head. Do you have a different reason? Why do you think the government is not as small business friendly as you think they should be?
Greed. So again, I like statistics, because a lot of things that I've uncovered, you can imagine if suing the government for over 30 years, I've uncovered stuff that's just astounding, right? So I've been in every office in Congress. I've been in every Senate office. I've been in every House office 2 or 3 times. I remember eating lunch with my Senator Barbara Boxer, and sitting in the dining room, and Ted Kennedy was sitting behind me, and I could hear what he was talking about, right? I rode in a little underground secret train that members of Congress ride, and Casper Weinberger walked up with his security detail. We had to step back and let him go ahead of us, right? So I've been all over Washington. I've met most of the presidents in my lifetime more than once. And when you're in the Capitol and you're in those buildings, you see these lobbyists. And it's really interesting. If you're a big time lobbyist, you want these gold presidential seal cufflinks. And you get that, you buy them basically for donating money, right? You buy them, right? So you see these guys in these $5,000 custom-made suits with alligator shoes on, right? Waiting to talk to the senator while I'm waiting to talk to some, 25-year-old kid, right? And they have their suit sleeves cut short so the presidential seal cufflinks show, right? So as you walk around, you just see these guys all over the building with these, 14 karat gold presidential seal, cufflinks. But so federal law mandates that a minimum of 23% of all government contracts go to small businesses, right? Well, the Fortune 500 firms that, in my opinion, virtually own the federal government, they want every penny the government spends. So they want to kill all federal small business programs because they want that money. And to tell you the truth, I've got a legal opinion from Professor Charles Keefer, who I believe is the most famous attorney in America and the nation's leading expert on federal contracting law. He was the attorney for the House of Representatives, I think, for like 12 years. And he teaches contracting law at the University of Baltimore. And he wrote a legal opinion about 3 years ago that agreed with my position that small businesses are getting no more than 3% of all federal contracts, not the 23. So the United States government is anti-small business because the big business has such a powerful lobby, and they want all the government money. And so they've got to, kill the small business programs. And quite frankly, what they do in Washington, it's what I call astroturf. So there's a lot of these organizations that look like grassroots organizations. When you look at them, it looks like, they've got a name that sounds good, like the National Federation of Independent Business, the National Small Business Association, right? The U.S. Small Business Chamber of Commerce. They're all funded by the government and Fortune 500 firms, most of them. So I've been involved in this, like I said, for 30 years. I'm not aware right now of a small business advocacy group that's not funded by Fortune 500 firms. I'm not aware of one. And if there is one, I'd love to talk to them. Let's just say this. I've been on every TV news program. I've been in every newspaper. No one's ever called me from another small business group and said, gosh, we'd like to help you. How can we help you? I've never gotten that phone call from any other small business group in the country. So another thing that happens is they will pass a program like the PPP program, right? Yeah. Which is supposed to help small businesses. But when you look at who got the money, it's all big businesses, right? Again, I remember sitting in my kitchen watching Obama, McCain, and Bush say we need to pass the Troubled Asset Relief Program so small businesses could have access to capital. They pushed that as it was a small business program. In reality, it all went to big banks who bought, Lear jets. I remember some guy, bought a gold toilet and spent $1 million on the bathroom in his office, right? And small businesses got nothing. And you were talking about credit card companies. After that Troubled Asset Relief Program was passed, the credit card companies went out to small businesses and cut all their the limits on their credit cards. I've got a good friend that has a very successful small business. She's got the best credit rating you could get. And all the credit card companies that she had cut her limits in half for no reason. So, but yeah, the desire for big businesses to get all the money the government spends has turned the government into an anti-small business entity. Here's something I'll tell you that might surprise you: the Small Business Administration, it's been closed for a decade. It's been closed. They cut the budget to the point that they can't operate. I was in the building a few years ago, and there was nobody there. There was one. It was a huge floor. It must have been a 10,000 square foot floor. There's one guy in there, right? So yeah, the Small Business Administration has been closed for a decade. Nobody knows that. Let's just say this. I don't want to talk about this too much, but 99% of all jobs in America come from small businesses. Half the gross domestic product, half the private sector workforce, over 90% of U.S. exports, right? Well, the budget for the one agency in government to help those 30 million small businesses is less than $1 billion. It's like $875 million. Now, the agency in Washington to help the 1% that's already getting 97% off federal spending, their budget's $10 billion. So my statistic to prove that I say the federal government's anti-small business is, look at the budget for the SBA. It's less than $1 billion. Look at the budget for the Commerce Department that represents Fortune 500 firms. It's $10 billion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty clear cut thing. And we'll see what happened there with the graphics. But, Lloyd, I wanted to just follow up on this kind of general notion of why this is largely under talked about. Because obviously, we're not hearing this as much from a lot of the news, obviously, other than when you're getting interviewed on other programs. And so, is this the same root cause? It's the ownership. Like, we have the consolidation in the media industry where we've had basically it consolidated into 6 main hands. Is that the main reason why this is not talked about? Because I don't even hear often as much pro small business rhetoric from even like the progressive wing of like the Democrats who are supposed to care about average people. Why don't you think small business is talked about in a much more mainstream way? Because we are seeing a death of small business across America, and we're seeing formation rates and failure rates and how many people are open. It's really startling. Why don't you think that's getting as much like buzz like in the media?
I got a great answer. I got 2 answers for you. All right. Number one, national media, their customers are their advertisers. So CNN, ABC, Fox, who are their customers? The people watching? No, you're not the customer. The customer, is the advertisers, right? So almost all media, whether it's the New York Times or CNN or the Huffington Post, whatever, they're a business that sells advertising. So if you're talking national media, who advertises on national television? Fortune 500 firms, right? Now, here's something that I think you'll find interesting. Let's just say ExxonMobil is a conservative company and Apple is a liberal company. Well, they have a common interest. They want their taxes cut and they want less government regulation. And their lobby is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So for as long as I can remember, Fortune 500 firms have been selling the idea of cutting their taxes so they can create jobs. And I remember the first month Trump was in office, he said, we need to cut taxes on the corporations so they can create jobs. Well, the truth is, Fortune 500 firms have not created one net new job in over 40 years. Not one. I say the Kauffman Foundation did that study about 8, 9, 10 years ago, right? So think about it. If the Census Bureau says companies with less than 500 employees are responsible for 99% of the net new jobs, at the most, that's 1% that the other, companies could create, right? But so these Fortune 500 advertisers do not want Lloyd Chapman going on CNN and unrelentingly talking about the fact that small businesses create virtually 100% of the net new jobs, and Fortune 500 firms don't create jobs. And guess what? A lot of them pay zero taxes. So CNN's not going to have me on the show talk about how their biggest advertisers need to have their taxes raised, right? And how they don't create jobs.
Not creating jobs, not raising income as much as they should be, and not, paying taxes. All the ways that they could send the money back in. And I think
and getting subsidies on top of that stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. The subsidies on top of that. But I think it generally makes sense structurally, because when you think about these like large businesses, what are they doing a lot of the times? It's either often consolidation through like merger and acquisition, which is a lot of the times you're trying to take the tech out and you're obviously trying to cut out some of the redundancy in staffing. A lot of the times when you've had a more mature business line, it's not as much business development growth as it is trying to cut margins, which again is usually trying to automate away staffing from it. When you think of who has the capital to invest in something like automation, it's more often these large companies that can try and cut their labor force. And so, it's a startling statistic what you told me, but it's like I can actually feasibly believe that has not created any net new jobs, because inherently it's against what the big businesses do.
Yeah. They're shipping jobs overseas.
That too. Yeah.
At a record rate. And they're not creating jobs. And here's something that I really got a hold of today talking to my assistant. All the information that had been out there on the internet that showed that small businesses created, 99 to 100% of all new jobs, it's been removed. It's been removed. For years, I would write press releases and blogs and link to the U.S. Census Bureau's website. Here's the data. Here's the U.S. Census Bureau data. They took it off the Census Bureau's website. So we were looking today for a report that showed that small businesses create like 98 to 98% net new jobs. There's nothing, but it literally was methodically removed from the internet, including the Census Bureau removing it from their website. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I decided to do it today. I'm going to have my lawyer do a Freedom of Information request to the U.S. Census Bureau for that data, and I'm going to sue them, and I'm going to get it. It'll probably take me a couple of years, but I'm going to get that data. I'm going to put it back on the internet. There's stories out there that people have written about how small business create the jobs. I'll tell you another weird thing. What the lobby for big businesses do is they hire pseudo-journalists to write stories that it's a myth that small business create the jobs. And so those stories that it's a myth that small business create the jobs, that's what has replaced the stories that were there 5 and 10 years ago, the small business create all the jobs. So it's a very well-funded, very smart campaign to eradicate all data that shows that Fortune 500 firms haven't created one job in over 40 years.
I mean, that's a pretty damning indication of, what we all fear and what we all know to be true. But like when you use the O word, when you say we're living in an oligarchy, people are like, oh, that's a little too much there. But they're literally writing the laws. They're funneling where the money goes. I mean, how much more proof do we need that like democracy, we're worried about democracy being dead, but it's like, have we ever really had it? Especially
America's not a democracy. Let's just say this: if we could take a national survey and say, do you think Fortune 500 firms should get federal small business contracts? I would think 99% of people would go, no, I don't. And yet I've been fighting for 30 years to stop that, right? I've been in federal court continually for 3 decades to stop that. And it's going like crazy right now. It's still happening. I'll tell you something that I remember when Hillary Clinton was running for president. I saw a video of her, and she said that for the first time in history, that more small businesses were closing than opening. And this was, like 4 or 5 years ago, right? And I started doing some research on that. And yeah, that's true. So think what's going to happen in a country where the small businesses, where most Americans work, where all the jobs come from, every day more are closing than opening. So tomorrow morning, there'll be fewer small businesses than there was this morning, right? I saw another shocking statistic from I think it was the World Bank. Now, this was 2 or 3 years ago, but it said worldwide, in the ease of starting a new small business, America was like 26. I remember, I think it was like Macedonia. It was easier to start a small business in Macedonia and Iraq than in America. That was from the World Bank.
And that's like literally the American dream. Its concept is
American myth.
Yeah. Oh,
Which
God.
is at this point the American myth, because we act like, oh, you can just pull up your bootstraps and you can become anything you want. But there are so many things in our way and like purposeful roadblocks. And like there are so many big, giant entities that do not want us to get a leg up. They do not want us on a parity with them.
Yeah, a friend of mine was talking to me about that several years ago, and he got me thinking. But Fortune 500 firms, I think, are anti-small business. They want, if they can get rid of all the small businesses, and everyone's got to work for a big business, then they can control the wages and things like that, right? But I do see clear evidence that big businesses are not small business friendly. In fact, I would call them violently anti-small business. Just look at legislation, look at policy. Look at the PPP program. That's the most recent thing. That money went to very, very big businesses. I
couldn't believe after 2008, and we saw that enormous transfer of wealth. Yep. And I thought, surely we weren't going to let that happen again. And we did. It just absolutely deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
You start seeing like Kanye West and the Trumps got PPP money. And you're like, they don't need it.
And a bunch of the relatives of the politicians themselves, too.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The stock trading. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about small business, too, can we talk about like Jeff Bezos and online retail completely like decimating what little like brick and mortars were left?
Yeah. I was disappointed when Biden didn't increase the budget for the Small Business Administration. And I'm going to keep using the term, it's closed. It's not open anymore. When Bush was elected the first time, Bush Jr., he cut the SBA staffing and budget by 50% within his first 24 months. And I talked to a guy that worked there for 29 years. He said Bush had laid off the core competency of the Small Business Administration. And Trump appointed a lot of Pentagon officials in the SBA. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine taking somebody? In fact, the guy who heads the press office for the SBA is a retired naval commander, Terry Sutherland, whose background is in surface weapons warfare systems. Yeah, he's going to help out a small business a lot. If you want to start a small business, you need some information about surface weapons warfare systems. How can you possibly have a small business without surface weapons warfare knowledge, right? And Terry Sullivan's going to be there to help you.
We all know this. This is rule number one of small business. Oh my Lord! But just to
that's
go
like
ahead, Jackie.
The wrecking crew. So that is a purposeful, like the Republicans, and like both parties have lots of culpability, but Republicans love to say the government doesn't work. Elect me and I'll prove it. And then they go in and they kneecap these departments and they defund them, they defang them, and they don't, because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I grew up a Republican, then I became a Democrat. I worked on Obama's campaign. I would do radio shows for him from 4:30 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon. And he appointed me on his small business advisory, committee. And he released a press release that I wrote that said that most Americans work for small businesses. It's a valuable resource, and we need to end the diversion of federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. 2 days after he put it out, they withdrew it, and he closed his small business advisory panel and wouldn't accept any of our recommendations. One of our recommendations was to quit giving federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms, and he wouldn't even do that.
God.
Yeah. So quite frankly,
thank you for mentioning that, because people think that he was an incredible, like he was elected, in my opinion, as a populist, and then he turned around and was a total corporatist, like everybody else.
He was.
Yeah,
he was.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
He still has that image. He
does.
He prosecuted more journalists under the 1918 Espionage Act than every president in history combined. When he ran for president, he said being a whistleblower is, the highest form of patriotism. Google Obama's war on whistleblowers. Look up Barrett Brown and Jeremy Hammond, right? He pursued people viciously. Every day that he ran for office, he said, when I'm elected president, I will enact a windfall profits tax on the oil and gas industry and use that money to help indigent families pay their fuel bills because people were freezing to death up north, right? He said that every day. Google Obama's windfall profit tax on oil and gas and see what happens. 2 days after he was elected, it disappeared, and he never said it again. Yeah, Google Obama's windfall profit tax on oil and gas industry, and that's an example. But yeah, Obama was he tried to close the SBA. He tried to close it by combining with the Department of Commerce, which was Ronald Reagan's plan to close it, and Republican Senator Burr's plan to close it. Obama tried to close it by combining with the Department of Commerce, and with the help of Public Citizen, we stopped him. They put out a big investigative report about 3 days before he was going to announce he was going to do that, and he stopped. But Obama was not. He was not a pro small business president by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, we appreciate your work to push back on that, Republican or Democrat alike. Lloyd, I have one final question for you as we're wrapping up. This is something that Jackie alluded to slightly, and I wanted to just get back to it. We've been having this big just technology influence of, basically enabling, as I was talking about before, automation, as well as more non-physical retail, more warehouse shipping, of a small business economy, things like Amazon sucking up so much small business. What do you think needs to be done to try and address those types of technological changes that I think generally are going to be more accessible to larger entities, automation in particular?
Well, I'm like a broken record. That the first thing that needs to happen is President Biden needs to comply with the Small Business Act and make sure that 23% of all federal contracts go to small businesses. Make sure Black, Hispanic, minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned small businesses just get the percentage of federal money that the law has said since 1953. That's the first thing, right? But that's a tough question. I would say that looking into the future, I think there's going to be a problem with the technology taking jobs away. I can't think, some Asian guy on TV a year ago talking about artificial intelligence, and that it was going to replace a huge segment of the workforce, right? So I'm not hopeful about the impact of technology on the middle class and working class Americans and small businesses. And quite frankly, I'm old enough to have been in business before the internet, before cell phones. I remember we got our first fax machine. It was like something Star Trek. It was, oh, look at this. It was magical, right? But today, because of the internet, I can buy things directly from the manufacturer. I used to sell shoes when I was in high school in a shoe store. Well, today you can buy shoes directly from Nike or New Balance. You can go on the internet and buy them directly from them, right? And so technology has not been a big help, I don't think, to the middle class and small businesses. And it seems to exacerbated the concentration of wealth, like Bezos. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it largely does to me. And I think, to me, it indicates the need for some level of redistributive policy, whether it be, as you said, through things like the Small Business Act and just paying that 23% finally, or things like, and I don't know if this is the specific Asian man you were referencing, it could have been someone like Andrew Yang on television advocating things like a universal basic income. I think some degree is going to be needed because I think technology inherently exacerbates inequality in to some degree.
Absolutely, yeah. It has. When you look at what's happened in the last 30 years, Robert Reich has a video called Inequality for All. Noam Chomsky has one called Requiem for the American Dream. And when you look at those statistics, the purchasing power of the average American family has gone down every year for over 30 years. And, more people, I think, in your generation are living with their parents than any point in history.
I live with my parents right now, so I'm going to say that's a very accurate statistic.
my parent lives with
me. I'd rather pay them and help their mortgage than help a landlord get their own mortgage paid off.
Yeah, if I was your age, I'd stay with my parents as long as I could. Save my money. When I moved out of my room, I'd move into a house.
It's true, though.
Really quick, I know this isn't on the list of questions, but I was wondering if you could address number one, like, how do you feel about the $15 an hour minimum wage in relation to small businesses, and also healthcare, like the burden of healthcare on small businesses? All
right. I know a little bit about the burden of healthcare on small businesses because I've got a lot of friends that, talk about that. And the real problem with that is, in America, healthcare is a for-profit business. The solution to all problems of wealth in healthcare, it can't be a for-profit business, right? And I think Michael Moore had a movie about that. What was that movie he made about that? About healthcare around the world? And he was in all the different countries. Did you see that? I can't think of the name of it. But
there's a frontline one that's amazing called Sick Around the World. They did Sick Across America and then Sick Around the World. And they go to the six countries with universal health care, and they ask very important people, how many people a year go bankrupt because they get sick? And like the man in Japan had his interpreter ask the question again because he didn't think he heard it right because it was such a foreign concept. Right. So like in other countries, it's illegal for insurance companies to make a profit. And here, it's like, I don't think people understand what it's like everywhere else. So we think we have the best, when in actually we're getting gouged. We don't get great care. We have a lot of people die in the healthcare industry. I'm sorry. It's not like popular to talk about, but the healthcare industry itself kills a lot of people. So like, it's just like, it's not like this everywhere else. Just like gun problems. It's not like this everywhere else, like money in politics. It's not like this everywhere else. We're so uniquely American, aren't we?
Every year in America, 100,000 people die from known side effects of properly prescribed medication. In England, more people die from prescription drugs than from car accidents in England, right? But I think that Michael Moore movie was Where to Invade Next, something like that. But yeah, healthcare, it's a big problem. I think that that everyone should have healthcare. I just, it's unimaginable to me to think that someone would get sick and they've got to die because they don't have the money to pay the doctor and pay for their medication. They don't, they don't have that problem in Canada or in Norway. The whole world has solved this problem. America is the only country, to my knowledge, that still has this problem of how to provide universal health care, right? So what was the other part of your question? Healthcare, what was the other part?
It was the minimum wage.
The minimum wage. I don't know much about that, but it seems to me like if everyone had a minimum wage, I think it would boost the middle class economy. I think about Henry Ford. You may not know this, but Henry Ford paid his workers like twice as much as anybody else, and they all bought his cars, right? So I kind of think that a minimum wage, a living wage, would overall be very good for the economy. That would actually be, quite frankly, probably a real economic stimulus program to put that money back into the middle class. Here's an idea. Ready? How about we get Fortune 500 firms to pay their taxes and cut taxes on small businesses so they can afford to give their employees a minimum wage and health care. Let's make Jeff Bezos pay taxes, right? And then everyone else can have a minimum wage and not have to die because you got sick.
And I always cite that like money problems are the number one cause of divorce.
Sure.
The healthcare industry is the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country. Ergo, our medical system is directly like causing divorces. That's And we talk about the sanctity of marriage.
It's creating an unloving country indeed. Oh boy. But Lloyd, it's been so great. I could talk to you all day, but I just want to ask, just to respect your time, is there any final thoughts that you want to share with the People's Basics audience out there? Because otherwise, we'd love to bring you back sometime to talk even more.
I will share a fun fact with you. 2 years ago, I was in a bad car wreck and I have a traumatic brain injury. And so when I'm talking to you guys and you ask me questions, I got to really think about it, right? I think I didn't quite answer your question. That's why. And by the way, this podcast will be used in my trial. The insurance company will use it to show that I don't have a traumatic brain injury.
Right.
But, hello, insurers.
State Farm. Yeah.
Yes.
Here's something I want everyone to think about as we close here. Realize that small businesses are, in fact, in reality, the engine of economic growth in this country. And that every citizen needs to do anything they can to try to get the federal government to give small businesses 23% of all federal spending that the law mandates. The Senate did a study 10 years ago that said for every 1% federal contracts a small business went up, it would create 100,000 net new jobs. All the research I've got shows small businesses are getting 3, not 23. If they gave small business the full 23%, that's a 20% more. That would virtually double the number of new jobs that are created in America every year just by complying with that law that was passed in 1953. So I want everyone to get behind that and help me get that pushed through somehow.
Yeah, we'll certainly follow up if you got any links you want us to include for the people out there. So check the description section down below. But Lloyd, it's been a pleasure being able to talk with you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to both of you. John, Jackie, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And as I got to say, as a small business ourselves, we really appreciate the work you're doing out there, fighting for us, the little guys out there. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's now go to our outro. Everyone, this was Lloyd Chapman. Please, again, check the description down below. Consider looking more into that Small Business Act so you can inform yourself better about that push to get that 23% allocated spending. And as always, you're also going to find in the description section down below all of our info. You'll hit our Linktree link and you'll find all of that you want to find about us. Join the community, all our shows, everything. But that being said, make sure you also subscribe. And Jackie, do you got any final thoughts you want to share with the folks out there?
No, that my mind is blown. I'm angry. After these really good interviews, I'm always like amped, and I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. I just know it. So I want to I'm going to have to listen to this all over again. And we're going to have to look at all those videos that he recommended. We're going to have to definitely add those all to the description too. Yeah.
So
for sure.
Everyone, enjoy your ability to pause and rewind to get all those references. And with that being said, my friends, I hope you all have a great day out there. And as always, I hope you stay classy out there, my universal people.
Peace out, y'all.
A rose by any other name still advocates just as sweet. Rosebuds, the hill of roses is no more. We are now the people's basics. In the coming months, we'll be rolling out a new website, our comic series, and rewards to help support our new startup, media, and technology venture. In the meantime, check out our new podcast, The People's Basics, with hosts Jackie Sawicki and I, Jonathan Munitz, where we'll be breaking down a different societal basic each week with our friends, colleagues, and experts. Join us, and let's get back to the universal basics. Please help us by appeasing the algorithm gods with a like, share, subscribe, and hitting that bell today. Stay basic, my friends.